Thanks for joining us this morning on our webinar, Reinventing Our Messages. We are so glad that you're here. And so first of all, let me introduce Laura Chowning and Dr. Lynn Davey, who will be our primary presenters today. Laura is on staff here at Prevent Child Abuse Kentucky. She currently serves as our Manager of External Communications and Engagement and has been here for about 11 years. She is the face of our social media, and many of you know her also as kind of leading the charge with our partners. So we're very happy that Laura has chosen to share her time and expertise with us. Dr. Lynn Davey has a background in psychology and human development. She has served as a professor as well as the vice president of the Frameworks Institute, where she designed and analyzed research that investigated public understanding of a host of social problems and then identified frames that would improve public understanding and support for policy solutions. She's the owner of her own consulting company, Davey Strategies, and when we kind of launched upon this endeavor, which Laura will go into more detail, we reached out to our national office, Prevent Child Abuse America, and asked, gosh, who out there is considered an expert on reframing? And hands down, they said, you need to get with Lynn Davey. So we are so happy that Dr. Davey has chosen also to share her time and expertise with us.
Thank you for that lovely introduction, Jill. It's really been a treat to work with Prevent Child Abuse Kentucky. And I thought before we get started on sharing the toolkit with you, we just give those folks who weren't at the workshop that I did on site a little bit of an introduction to communication science and what the messaging toolkit is based on. And so in general, the way we talk about social problems affects how people understand their causes and solutions. And today there is just a growing body of communication science that points to how we can improve understanding and motivate people to action. And so I've been sharing that through workshops and technical assistance with PCA Kentucky, and Laura has put together really this brilliant toolkit for you all in helping you hone your messages in ways that are based on this communication science. And I would say sort of the two biggest things that I like to share with people is that the way we think, our cognition sort of readily reinforces personal attributions of responsibility and obscures systems. Can sort of bring the strategies that are going to bring the systems and structures into light and the solutions into light to your work. And that's really what the toolkit is doing. So next slide. So really intentional framing, so really thinking about messaging and how to do it is needed if we want to improve understanding of complex issues and build support for programs and policies. So people don't know what you all know about the causes and solutions to these very complicated issues. So we have to frame really intentionally. And that's because, as you see here, our thinking is guided by cognitive frameworks called schema. Some people call them mental models, but in general, these are mental shortcuts that are based on assumptions we have about people, groups, issues, regions, politics, etc., beliefs that we have, and also our past experience about things. So I wanted to share this slide and have you think about it a little bit, because so frequently, we kind of, our communications work and we kind of treat the audiences of our communications as if they have no prior assumptions or beliefs that could get in the way of what we're saying. So we can really map these mental models that people bring to help them reason about issues, and then our framing strategies can do better jobs of navigating those models once we know what they are. And a little bit later, Laura's going to talk to you about what these sort of dominant mental models are that people bring to the issue so that you can better understand why the tools in the toolkit are constructed in the ways that they are. And then next slide. So I just basically said this. For social issues, we can research how people are most likely to reason and then test and implement the framing strategies that are going to help people reason more productively. And so the toolkit is based on research about how people think about child abuse and neglect and its prevention, and based on research that has shown which framing strategies are going to help people reason more productively, sort of come off of their knee-jerk, easy to think, accessible ways of thinking about the issue because of how it's been framed for so many decades in the discourse, and think more productively about that.
So this is Laura, and I'm going to give just a really quick overview. Jill alluded to kind of where we came from and why we are here today, but we received a grant from the Child Victims Trust Fund in July to start this project, to look at what we say and how we say it when we share messages around child sexual abuse and its prevention. We received a framing analysis from Dr. Davy from Lynn in November of 2018. So last fall, she went through all of our child sexual abuse prevention materials and came back with a document that allowed us to kind of look at how we need to reinvent our messages. January of 2019, we brought in a group of individuals, many of you who are on this webinar, partners, and those who we know are going to help us to get these new messages out to the communities. Lynn hosted a one-day messaging seminar entitled Effective Storytelling for Social Change, helping us receive the tools that we need to reinvent these messages. And then today, we are letting you know about this new toolkit. And the reason why we decided on a toolkit was we wanted our partners, we wanted individuals across the state who are working in prevention to have something tangible, something in hand that they can refer to when they think about the way they communicate. And so when you are creating new messages, we wanted you to have something that you can look back to in understanding what the public discourse is, which we're going to go over in a moment, what framing tools you have available, and assist in creating those new messages. So when we think about the messages that we've been sending for years and years, and as Dr. Davy provided us with research and looked at what Kentucky was doing, but not only Kentucky, the nation, we noted that there were 4 dominant frames of how the community and how our audiences were receiving information. Sensationalism, unseen sexual predators in our midst, parent-family responsibility, and child safety. And I'm going to allow Dr. Davy to kind of expand upon that a little bit.
Sure. So, and these are all kind of interrelated, but if you think about the way that for many years, and for actually, you know, still to this day, what it's really easy for the media to do when there's an issue of child abuse or neglect. I mean, a lot of the stories that people are confronted with in the news are case-based, and they are about, you know, they're highlighting the sort of horrors of what happened and the criminal atrocities. There's lots of stories about things, you know, institutional incidences of abuse, about the failure of child protective services, about, you know, families gone wrong and all of that sort of thing. So because the news media really loves sensationalism, it's not surprising that they would be approaching such a difficult and complicated and tragic issue with those same sort of sets of, those same sort of elements of reporting. And so that has a couple of different effects. And one of them is that when children are harmed, that parents are responsible for that. So a lot of the framing of this issue sort of either consciously or unconsciously reinforces that parents and families are solely responsible for the development of children. And while they might be primarily responsible, we know that children develop in context of relationships and environments. So again, that does a little bit to obscuring systems that might help. It also has the effect of turning the community into a potential predator. So that sort of unseen sexual predators in our midst, everybody, I'm sure, is more than familiar with stranger danger being a dominant frame out there on the issue, despite, what the research says about the most probable child predators, right, are known to families and children. And then given all of that, you're sort of left with not really thinking anything about healthy development and how to facilitate it, but just keeping children safe. Let's just protect children from the predators and the community and the horrors that can happen to them. So that has been the sort of overall, four elements of the dominant frames that are in the culture around the issue.
And as we looked at those dominant frames, we realized, yes, that is what we're seeing with our partner network, with entities around the state, sending out messages around child sexual abuse prevention, as well as our own messages. So what are some child sexual abuse prevention communication goals that we want to focus on as we work on reinventing our message? And those include reducing the risk of child sexual abuse of all children. So prevention, exactly what we're doing or trying to do every day. To see a shift in perceived responsibility for children. So we move from that personal responsibility, which it is. Yes, the person receiving the message is responsible for prevention and keeping kids safe, but we move to that shared community responsibility. We want to increase the public support for policy supportive of families and children, and reduce the belief that getting help for parenting is bad. And so we want to see an increase that parents understand it's okay to ask for help. And then increase the public awareness of factors that inhibit as well as promote healthy child development, which includes that child sexual abuse. And then we began looking at the frame that we've got versus the frame that we need. And so, Lynn, if you could touch on that frame that we need.
Sure. So we've kind of outlined the frame that we've got, and that's what we're living in. And I should also say that, advocates and experts and scientists have done an incredible job over many decades of bringing public awareness to this issue. And so I did want to pause and say that there's been some positive benefits of that, right? But we're kind of, if we're not careful, can get stuck in the frame we've got piece. So we want to move toward, and can we make sure everybody's phone is muted? Because I'm getting, thank you. So we want to move against the sort of horror, sensationalistic, and have sort of more reasonable and less rhetorically charged tone in the stories that we have. It's one thing to articulate that things are serious. It's another to say there's a crisis or it's horrifying, these sorts of things. And to show some of the context. So a friend of mine likes to say, don't use the telephoto lens or the zoom lens, but use the wide angle lens that shows the context. So telling people, making people a little bit smarter about some of the causal influences of abuse and neglect, and also that there are solutions in the community that are strategic, that are community-based, that work. So focus on solutions. And then also articulating values, not of just protecting kids and keeping them safe, but of sort of applying innovative solutions to really difficult challenges. So you can sort of get a sense that everything I'm saying is like, you want to talk about the seriousness of it, but you don't want people to be overwhelmed by thinking there's nothing that can be done or that the only solutions are fixing families, right?
Exactly. And so that led us, I'm having trouble with my slides, sorry. That led us to, with Dr. Davies' research and information and then what we've been looking at, to develop these 6 recommended strategies. So we want to begin with shared values. So we all understand that we care about children, we care about their well-being, and we want the community to be involved. We also want to tell causal stories, the why. Why is this a challenge? And then explain how to solve it. So again, being solutions focused. We want to use data sparingly, and the reasoning behind that is people know this is an issue. People know that child abuse and neglect occurs, child sexual abuse occurs, and so a lot of times those data or that data and those statistics cause folks to freeze and not know where to move forward. So if we do use data, to use it sparingly with interpretation, We also want to stay away from jargon. A lot of what we understand in our field may not translate over to what our audience or what the community is understanding. Further, we want to widen the lens of attribution of responsibility. So it's not just a parent's responsibility or a caregiver's responsibility. And we've even seen it put on the child as their own responsibility. It is all of our responsibility to work together to decrease the instances of child sexual abuse. And then further emphasize what those societal benefits are. How does prevention help us? And then champion those programs that work. So telling those stories of what works. So an example of a message that doesn't work. As parents, we make daily decisions to keep our children safe, but it's easy to remember sexual abuse could happen to any child at any place by anyone. It's our responsibility to prevent child abuse. Now, a little history on this message. This is actually one that Prevent Child Abuse Kentucky used last year as we worked to do new messages, new public service announcements for our partners and for our audience across the state. And we brought in a group of partners and key stakeholders within this field last year and began looking at how we wanted to recreate those messages. And this is one that we came up with. We thought, this is going to work. And then as we looked at the research and had our consultation with Dr. Davey, we realized what this message actually does is singles out one group as responsible. So we're putting all of the ownership on the parents and saying it's only their responsibility to keep their own kids safe from child sexual abuse, when it's an actual shared responsibility of the community at large. So we looked at reframing this. When adults are empowered with the right tools and information, occurrences of child sexual abuse can be prevented. Caregivers become more confident, and children receive the foundation to strengthen their ability to remain healthy relationships into adulthood. I forgot a word there, sorry. Or to maintain healthy relationships into adulthood. And so we, again, want to give you a couple of examples as we go through today, but within your toolkit, there's going to be a number of examples and new messages that you can utilize as we move forward. Another example is, although you might think most children are abused by strangers, the fact is most child maltreatment is committed by parents or someone the family knows. That's why we have to reach out and educate parents about how to do better. So this message in particular tells audiences of a false belief that only strangers abuse children. And again, we're not actually saying that. We're saying the fact is most child maltreatment is committed by parents or someone the family knows, but we're reminding the audience of that false belief. So that defaults back to stranger danger, to bad parents being the problem, that parent education is the only solution to preventing child sexual abuse. So another way to change that message was, did you know 90% of the time perpetrators of child sexual abuse are known to the family and are not considered strangers? Education is key to preventing child sexual abuse. We can all learn signs to look for in identifying potentially harmful situations and what to do about it. So we are using a statistic there, but we're automatically pointing to a solution, that education and learning the signs of identifying and reporting child sexual abuse is a way to go, that next step. There's another variety of messages, from victim blaming to putting the responsibility on children, reinforcing false beliefs and systems that the toolkit will look at. And so in the toolkit, here's the resources that you will find: tips for framing messages in a manner that points to action, sample press releases, talking points, letters to the editors, social media posts. And today we're going to look at an example of press releases and social media. It includes a reframing checklist that will help you in forming those new messages. So as you're developing a message for anything, social issue, but specifically child sexual abuse, you can go through this checklist, again, prior to creating that message to help you in that. We have a scorecard that Lynn had put together in some of her work, and then as well led you to some additional resources that will help you in the reframing process. So an example of what doesn't work. So your recent coverage, dear editor, letter to the editor, dear editor, your recent coverage of Kentucky being #1 in cases of child maltreatment reinforces the need for effective prevention program and interventions that support families and children in our community. We can do better and must work to see our children stay safe. Our agency has programs that can help. This is a ranking we as Kentuckians should not want for our children. Please know child abuse is preventable and we can do more if we work together. So contact us to learn more. So some of the big key things that stick out here that are an issue. One, we're starting with a statistic that is overwhelming. We are not providing real solutions. We're saying, oh, contact us, we can help you. But there's no call to action or resources. And so, Lynn, is there anything else in regards to why this doesn't work that you'd like to add to this?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great example because it seems like pretty reasonable, right? And we know that when these kind of rankings come out, I mean, sometimes there's nothing we can do to not get in the news about that. But if we're going to have to deal with those kinds of stats, then we need to show people actual solutions. It also, cues up child safety as the only thing. It's not saying, oh, there are things that we can do to facilitate healthy development or give parents skills that can help them do that as well. While it's kind of reasonable in tone, it's just reinforcing a little bit too much the dominant frames.
And so that led us to looking at a reframed letter to the editor. So, dear editor, all parents want to protect, provide for, and nurture their child in a positive, healthy environment, but sometimes they need a little extra support. This is why I encourage people to proactively engage parents in their community and offer support, whether it is by making a meal for a family or reading to a child, helping out new parents with their crying infant, or offering to relieve the stress of another meal by bringing over dinner. Your recent coverage of child sexual abuse reinforces we all share a responsibility for the well-being of children and their families in Kentucky. Prevent Child Abuse Kentucky is working to help individuals understand it is possible to prevent child abuse while doing the things they love, which can help families in their community thrive. Collectively, these small steps will help create better, brighter futures for children and families in Kentucky. Sincerely. And so here we start with a fact that, we all parents want to protect and provide and nurture for their child. No parent wants to cause harm. Like, that's not their goal. And so then we look at how we can encourage people to be involved. So we go ahead and give them that solution. Then we point back to their coverage and what they've been writing about in their work, in their newspaper, and then give them a call to action. What does Prevent Child Abuse Kentucky do, or the agency that you work for do, and how can we help families in the community thrive? Any other thoughts on that, Lynn or Jill?
No, I think that was great.
Okay. So then another area of which we send out lots of messages is social media. And this top piece, I took this from Lynn. A tweet and a post are a frame. Ideas for effectively framing child sexual abuse prevention in social media. So we want to look at the us, not talk about them, what they can do. It's about collectively engaging the community. We want to focus on building healthy families, which will help communities thrive. Focus on community connections, not those individual parent responsibilities, which we've referred to already. We want to be solutions focused and point towards why it's mutually beneficial for families and communities, to clearly spell out solutions. And again, not focus on data or unframed data specifically, which can overwhelm people and cause them to just not take any type of action. We want to share stories that work, of efficacy, of programs and policies that have benefited children and families. Specifically here, addressing child sexual abuse. We don't want to share those vivid, dramatic details. And a big thing, especially for social media and communication in general, is the images that we're using. We want to try to get multiple actors and images and avoid tightly framed images of families and children alone. And I can say, just as the individual who's doing social media and communications and messaging at Prevent Child Abuse Kentucky, this one has been a hard one to broaden those images to community groups, to promote that it's a community effort and not utilize those tightly framed images of just parents and children or just parents. But we want to show coaches and mentors and librarians and other community members, and not frame it or utilize images that frame stranger danger or sad, bruised, crying children. We see that often, especially during Child Abuse Prevention Month. These images, again, that don't allow people to know what to do next. They don't call people to action. It hinders them from moving forward. So those sad, bruised, crying children. And then lastly, champion calls of action that work. We don't want to give people calls of action that allow them to be doomed for failure. And an example of that is expecting them to befriend individuals in their community and help them and support them, but then also continually point to, you got to report and turn in these families. So balance that. And again, allowing them to have calls of actions that are not doomed to fail. And with that, we're going to look at some specific examples of social media. And I'm going to allow Lynn to cover this piece.
Right. So I was looking through my Twitter feed for, with the hashtag of Child Abuse Prevention Month or Pinwheels for Prevention, and I came across this. And it's a very cute image, right? There's a pinwheel garden being planted. But the caption is, on Thursday evening, 526 pinwheels were placed in the Madison County Courthouse lawn. Each pinwheel represents a child who was abused or neglected in Madison County during 2018. And so it's kind of just a lost opportunity to tell a solution story, and it reminds people of the tragedy of child abuse and neglect without actually giving any solutions at all. So this, I will say, this is a step up from prior years of my Twitter feed in April that did have a lot of those sort of children who looked like they had been harmed or who were sad, or et cetera, but that there's more being done. And I also have to, you have to point to the leadership to PCA America for having this sort of healthy, happy kids and solutions-oriented posts that everybody can share. So this would be an example of kind of what you don't want to do. It's hard in 140 characters, or some of us have, I guess, a little bit longer now on Twitter, but you can always just put a link right to a solution story or impact or a program that's working in the community.
Exactly.
So what to do, I think, is on the next slide. And so, and I believe this is from Prevent Child Abuse America. So yes, they made a bunch of these images for their state chapters and partner agencies to use during April. But this is lovely. Small steps can make a big difference in a child's life. You can help kids and parents and make a difference in your own community by doing some of your favorite things, and then it links to what those are. And Laura had actually referred to this in their reframing as well. So if you see how these two are just a kind of a completely different take on the issue. And I also wanted to point out, I thought this was wonderful that you all did. So joining us, so there's an event, it's on the Capitol, so that already signals to people that there's a policy context here. And it says, to plant pinwheels as we kick off April Child Abuse Prevention Month, come show your commitment to supporting strong communities and healthy families. for Kentucky's children. I think that's so different from what I tend to see, which would have been, come show your commitment to ending child abuse or stopping child abuse, right? And so when you give people this notion that, oh, it's about healthy families and it's strong communities, it's a much more positive, welcoming way to deal with a very difficult issue. So I thought you did a great job on that.
Thank you, Lynn. And so again, within your toolkit, there's going to be reframe messages. And so these are two examples as well. It takes everyday courage by people like you to keep children safe. Trust your gut. Have body safety conversations with your kids. Ensure youth-serving organizations have prevention policies. Report any suspicion to proper authorities. These simple tasks can protect kids. Also, did you know establishing healthy boundaries, teaching assertiveness, monitoring your children's exposure to adult topics, helping your child identify trustworthy adults, identifying the difference between secrets and surprises are just a few everyday steps to help prevent child sexual abuse. What everyday steps are you taking? And again, these could be utilized in social media, but also other messaging outlets as you're communicating towards the prevention of child sexual abuse. And this second one in particular was actually reframed or taken partly out of our internet safety toolkit in ways that you can prevent child sexual abuse. Further within the toolkit that we will be providing, there is a framing template. And this comes from Davy Strategies. And it is something to look at before you start building your message. So why does this issue matter? So you begin with that appeal to shared values. What is the problem? What is the challenge at hand? What are the consequences? How can we solve it? So pointing them towards action, and then again, end with a specific task for the target audience. So something they can immediately do to be involved. And then we want to look at next steps. So today, you will receive a draft copy of the toolkit on recreating messages. It is in draft form because it has a few last minute edits that it needs, as well as some final approval. And so you guys are the lucky ones who get a draft example of it today. As soon as the final toolkit is ready, we will print hard copies to provide to all of our partners. It'll also be available electronically, and we will promote it in a variety of areas. It's our hope for you guys, those who we have chosen to be part of this webinar, to help us get these messages out to the community. It's our hope that you'll utilize the toolkit to look at what you say, how you say it, how the public receives your messages, and what changes you might want to make to promote action towards prevention of child sexual abuse. And then today, I didn't include this on the slide. Again, we will give you a copy of the toolkit along with a webinar evaluation. And an evaluation that kind of points more to the toolkit. So if you'll take time to look through it as well, if you'll complete that and get that back to us. And then we also ask if we can send you a follow-up survey in 3 months about how you're utilizing the toolkit. And then as appropriate and as you're needing, we will be available for technical assistance as you're looking at your messages and looking at recreating. Our hope too, and we talked about images earlier, is to create some images that will also assist in social media and other areas. And so we hope that you have found this helpful. And if you have questions, if you have put them I'm looking in the chat box to see, I don't see questions in relation to the webinar or the toolkit. If you have questions, if you have additional comments or any comments, in the days to come, if you will contact me, Lynn will be available so that we can track all comments and questions in one place. We ask that you send those to us or to me, and then I will get those responses back as you need them. So thank you so much for joining us today. And we look forward to continuing to reinvent our messages.